The entire energy and economic strategy of the Albanese government, the one and only policy approach of our Energy Minister Chris Bowen, the fiscal approach of all our state governments, bar none, the investment strategy of all our major banks, the research and development projects of most of our leading corporations, the investment approach of all the major superannuation funds, and the entire basis of our education system is pointless and futile and will destroy our country. There you have it. No, it's not me saying this. It's the only logical conclusion from comments made back in 2018 by none other than Bill Gates. Now, I'm not a fan of Bill Gates' various globalist fantasies, including his revolting anti-meat, let the povos eat roaches rubbish, but the one thing you can say about Bill Gates is that the guy knows how money works. And here he is, unequivocally stating back in 2018 what many of us have been saying for a long, long time, that trying to change the physical world's energy-producing solutions, trying to change, in other words, physics, chemistry and geology, through financial trickery and spreadsheet shenanigans is a fool's errand. Actually, that's being a bit harsh on fools. It is a moronic enterprise that will end in failure and is probably a closer way of paraphrasing what Mr. Gates said, and I'll show it to you in a minute. Currently, virtually every major political, financial, academic, and corporate enterprise in this country is operating on the fantasy that manipulating financial markets, tricky investment strategies, and centrally controlled government programs are all that is required to magically transform Australia into a renewables superpower.
I believe passionately in economic growth. It lifts people out of poverty. It turns aspiration into reality. We don't need less economic growth. We need more. What we do need to do is cut the cord between economic growth and emissions as we decarbonise our economy. We're going to need to generate a lot more electricity, not less. We need to electrify our passenger transport and basically anything else capable of sensibly being transferred to electric power. As we move our electricity generation to renewables, there's a massive task to create that electricity, store it and transmit it to where it's needed.
This clown is in charge of your energy. Keep those claims you just made in mind when I play you Bill Gates in a second. This is the current, all-encompassing, there is no alternative political approach. That, you heard it here, we have to decouple, said Chris Bowen, decouple economic growth from carbon emissions. Whoa, that in essence is what net zero is all about. According to one of the richest men in the world, that is akin to saying we have to decouple economic growth from economic growth. Right. But the fantasy isn't only at the political level. It permeates the echelons of Australia's business and corporate worlds.
Not only are mining magnate Andrew Twiggy Forrest and tech whiz Mike Cannon-Brookes Australia's two richest men, the multi-billionaires also claim to be alchemists. They boast they can turn green into gold, that the technology is now available to produce all the energy the world needs from renewable sources like wind, solar, and even hydrogen.
This is cloud cuckoo fantasy stuff, ladies and gentlemen, as Bill Gates will tell you in just a second. The idea of using financial tools to alter or create new forms of energy is laughable. Mike Cannon-Brookes is, of course, the same tech billionaire who, apart from covering half the Pilbara in solar panels, plans to buy up our fossil fuel companies in order to shut them down. To say that this is unbelievably reckless should go without saying. Just think about it. But again, I don't have to say it because Bill Gates, who makes Cannon-Brookes look about as wealthy as Oliver Twist, makes that very point abundantly clear. But before I play what Gates said, have a listen again to Chris Bowen boasting just before the election that his brilliant energy policy was not only based on this amazing modelling, but it would also reduce your power bills by $275.
We've released the most comprehensive economic modelling that any opposition has ever released about any policy ever in Australian history. And it showed reducing power prices by $275 by 2030, on average across the system, of course. And that is mainly by bringing on new renewable energy. And yes, you're right, Chris, you are right to a degree that we need to also improve transmission, which our policy does, and massively increase our storage.
You know, Chris Bowen has no idea what he's talking about when he starts doing that arm thing. Yes, yes, whoa, 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 whoa. He's rehearsed it all. Anyway, wants to look important. We now know, of course, that the $275 price reduction is a sick joke. Labor has abandoned that. That's gone out the window. So why on earth should we believe any of the other assumptions, which are much, much more implausible, or predictions in any of the modelling? Answer, we shouldn't. And again, I base my assertions not on my own conclusions, but on a simple extrapolation of what Bill Gates has said. The craziness of thinking that fiddling with financial mechanisms can magically transform the physical world of energy is nowhere better demonstrated than in the almost satirical concept of pumped hydro. Indeed, we learned today that the Queensland government is now embarking on this absurdist nonsense, which originated in this country with Malcolm Turnbull's Snowy 2.0 scheme, which has since become something of a standing joke. Even the CEO has abandoned it. Hydroelectricity in and of itself is fantastic, and it's a perfect energy source in countries like Norway, where you have huge mountains and deep valleys and fjords full of water, because nature provides you with an infinite abundance of extremely cheap and reliable energy and gravity. Pumped hydro is a different beast altogether, because by definition you are always going to use more energy pumping the water uphill than it can ever produce as it flows back down again. So the only way it can ever make any sense in a kind of Alice in the Looking Glass world is if you, and here it is again, fiddle with artificial financial mechanisms by charging less for the electricity being pumped up and more for the electricity being generated on the way down. In normal financial transactions, this is called price fixing, or arguably even fraud. But renewables financial investors, for obvious reasons, love it. What's not to like about a system that is already rigged to provide a profit? Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk today unveiled her plans for two multi-billion-dollar pumped hydro mega projects, one based around Burrumba Dam near Gympie, as Queenslanders, and the other in Mackay, I think, as Queenslanders' Labor government attempts to accelerate the pace to, wait for it, this is a quote, meet 50% renewables targets by 2030.
Today, I'm also announcing the second preferred pumped hydro site, 70 kilometres west of Mackay, for renewable energy storage. It will formally be known as the Pioneer Burdekin Pumped Hydro Project. I prefer to call it the Battery of the North. It will be the largest pumped hydro storage in the world.
Well, government sources say these projects are massive investments. I'll bet they are. Queensland ain't exactly Norway. And finally, we also learnt today that our major superannuation funds want the federal government to set a 75% by 2035 emissions reduction target. This is insane. The Investor Group on Climate Change, which represents members with $3 trillion of funds under management, all your future savings among them, by the way, if you happen to be unlucky enough to have put your super with them, including Aware Super, Cbus Super, Hester Super. This group has outlined a list of high priority policies to drive investment certainty in low emissions technologies. Their CEO, Rebecca Mikula-Wright, claims institutional investors had the capital to finance a clean energy economy. Really? Well, again, not according to what Bill Gates said back in 2018, they don't. Bill may not have $3 trillion of your money to play with, but he does have around $130 billion of his own to take care of, which is why I'm more inclined to be listening to him rather than to her or them. So, remembering all of that, and before we even go near questions like, will Australia going through all the dramas of transitioning to net zero actually make even the slightest difference to global temperatures? Answer, no. Just think about this. Our entire political strategy, our entire economic strategy, the majority of our business and long-term investment strategies, nearly all our scientific, academic and intellectual capital, and the majority of our scientific endeavours are all based on the premise that you can use financial levers to alter our physical world and transform the nature of our energy production. We are literally betting everything on one outcome.
Let's go. Anybody want to pile onto that right there?
Anybody else want to go on live?
Let's go.
And now, have a listen to Bill Gates explaining very clearly back in 2018, as a man who has made squillions out of managing money markets, why it is impossible to ever use financial tools to transform your energy-based economy. Watch and weep.
Whenever we came up with this term clean energy, I think it screwed up people's minds because now they don't understand. I was at this conference in New York, I won't name it, and they were saying, all these financial guys got on stage and said, oh, we're going to rate companies in terms of their CO2 output. And we're going to say this company puts out a lot of CO2 and financial markets are magical and all of a sudden the CO2 will stop being emitted. And I was like, okay, how are you going to make steel? Do you guys on Wall Street, do you have something in your desks that makes steel? What? Where's the fertilizer, cement, plastic? Where's it going to come from? You know, do planes fly through the sky because of some number you put on a spreadsheet? So the madness of this so-called finance is the solution. I just don't get that. There is no substitute for how the industrial economy runs.